the many gods table right here that has that extra column. This is what it looks like. So you have here, you believe in the Christian God versus the Christian God exists right here. But right here, instead of having no God, you have an alternative possibility. Now, instead of no God, like atheism is true, you now have the Muslim God exists right here. Now over here, this is where atheism is true. And you can actually have like Judaism, you could have Hinduism, which God is that, and which God is that, and which God, and somebody in the comments mentioned the Ahura Mazda. Nobody, I doubt, today believes who that is. Yeah, the Muslim deity is the Christian deity. Now that, my friend, I assuming you're doing this in good conscience, that you're not just trying to be combative or anything, but no theologian thinks that simpliciter with no explanation needed. They are, well, actually, if you were to believe that, you would need some nuance with respect to, so here would be some nuance. They're the same object, that is like the same substance, the same deity, let's say, but with respect to perspectives of the people worshiping them, like as you said, they have different theology. But you do have to nuance that. I think it's a little bit simplistic to just say they're just the same deity, just different theology. How, but yeah, the Abrahamic faith, and I added nuance. Yeah, okay, so I appreciate that. I really do. Yeah, now looking back at it, now there's a debate there though. And even with respect to like Mormons, for example, some people will say, well, Mormon God isn't God. And yeah, so, if you don't believe God exists, then you can just say, well, there's not the same deity at all, right? But if you do believe, like, so it needs some, here's the nuance that you need. You got to kind of be flustered on this. So here's the nuance that you need. If that God exists, it is the same object. If that God does not exist, if there is no such thing as any deity whatsoever, then there is no object out there. And so all that matters is the theology. All that matters is the perspective. All that matters is the story we keep telling ourselves. And if that's all that matters, then you have one story versus another story, and those are completely different stories. So, all right, let me jump back into the wage. Okay, you must wager. There is no choice. You're already committed. Which will you choose then? He says, right here, he says that leaves no choice. Where there's infinity, where there are not infinite chances of losing against that of winning, there is no room for hesitation. You must give everything. And since you are obliged to play, right? You're already playing this game whether you know it or not. Since you're obliged to play, you must be renouncing reason if you hoard your life rather than risk it for an infinite gain. If these really are the values, I hate that stupid thumbs up thing. Hey, what's up, Ace? If these really are the values here, right? And we'll go back to the original and I'll get to the many gods objection again. If these are the value right here, you have infinite reward versus infinite loss. That's an infinite chasm. Then you would be foolish not to stake your wager on infinite gain. And you might think, well, I don't agree with that chart. As he says, yes, but you must wager. There is no choice. You're already committed. Why? By the logic of the law of non-contradiction and the law of excluded middle. Either God exists or he doesn't. Okay, and if you want to add in extra gods, that's fine too. But you've got to do a chart for each one of those gods. Either that a God exists, or that God exists, or that God exists, or that God. Make the chart as big as you want, but you're still playing. Now, to the right here, let me show you the many gods chart again. So, actually, let me show you her article because I think she put it really well. I've got her article down here. It's one of her articles anyway. She's got a few on this. This is Liz Jackson, a colleague, a friend of mine. So I will show you that. So she says it better than I can. So she says this, right? So this chart actually comes from her stuff right here. This is the many gods objection. And then she says this. You might think the decision makers are telling us to believe either religion is better than believing atheists. However, this possibility, atheists go to heaven, theists go to hell. Okay? And then she says a common objection to the many gods objection can be summarized in 2 words. Probability matters. By the way, this article I'm getting from A Thousand Word Philosophy, Introductory Anthology. You can find this online, but she's also got more academic papers as well on this. So it matters even when dealing with infinite values. But you can see, imagine you're given the choice between a 90% chance at infinite good or a 10% chance at same good. You should clearly take the 90% chance, obviously. In other words, you should wager for the religion that you think is most likely to be true. Christianity and Islam actually do not have the same expected value because one religion is more probable than the other, and that you could find the evidence, right? So if I were to compare, for example, the evidence for Christianity versus the evidence for, I don't know, somebody in the chat said Ahura Mazda, right? Or Quetzalcoatl, right? Or Thor and Odin, or gosh, even Jedi is an established religion now because, people want to be all tongue in cheek and everything. So if I were to wager the evidence, if I would wager based on the strength of the evidence, then Christianity would clearly come out on top. Compare all those. You might think, well, what about compared to Islam? Well, go look up Islam apologetics and compare it to Christian apologetics. Ah, yes, they straight. I would show you my math. I'm not a probabilistic calculus mathematician, but the author of this work is. He, in fact, did some major work with, as I said in the beginning, which you weren't here for. He was a man of reason. He was a man of mathematics and physics. As I said before, he did some pioneering work. He's inventor of the mechanical calculator. I did some pioneering work on probability theory with Pierre de Fermat, and influenced things like probabilistic calculus, laid the foundation for Leibniz's formulation of calculus. So, yeah. Oh, the math doesn't exist. Go look it up in Pascal.